We are transported back in time to July 1990 to a building on the Fish Dock Road on Grimsby Docks. From its completion in 1900, this building has been the home of the Grimsby Ice Company. Production first started on October the 9th, 1901, and the factory has had several expansions during its lifetime. In the office, the clock is marking out the time, for this is the last month of production for the ice factory. A once thriving business is about to close, and in so doing completes another chapter in the life of the Grimsby fishing industry. Truly, it is a time for reflection. The main compressor house contains 4 of the 5 ammonia compressors, made by J&E Hall Limited of Dartford. Originally, power for the factory was provided by steam-powered vertical triple expansion engines. But in 1933 these were replaced by the large electric induction motors made by Manchester-based Metropolitan Vickers, each motor being 600 brake horsepower at 250 revs per minute and pulling 6,000 three-phase volts from the national grid. During peak production times, 4 machines ran together, with the spare used for maintenance and breakdown cover. The factory at peak production turned out up to 1,100 tonnes of crushed or block ice for the trawling trade, and employed 150 people. The 5th machine, added during the 1933 expansion, stands in a separate compressor hall. Beneath the compressor house, a hot well collects the oil residues from the factory. Now, with only 2 weeks left to run, production has been greatly reduced, but the factory can still produce up to 300 tonnes of ice a day. The old gauges, switches and alarm lamps of the control panel are a testament to an age gone by. The 6 condensers, each 16 foot high, contain 420 2-inch tubes, where heat is taken out of the ammonia by a water circulation. The ammonia is the refrigerant used to produce this, the finished product, blocks of ice. Here we have one of the 7 tank rooms. Beneath the wood-beamed floor is a large tank of calcium chloride brine, running the whole length of the room. The brine tank is kept cold by the ammonia refrigerant. The can moulds, 45 in each lift, are taken to the filling end of the tank room.
The ice is first pumped from boreholes in the valley, our own boreholes. It eventually finds its way into these tanks along here. These tanks then, the pipes then rotate and tip water into these ice holes from the making tanks. There are 36 of these rows from one end to the other of the tank, and the pushing gear, the gear at the back, called pushing gear, pushes the whole set of rows forward the distance of the width of one set of cans, thus exposing one at the other end, which is lifted out of ice. Then, when the ice is lifted out, the empty cans are brought back, then refilled from this tank again and dropped into the brine once again. The brine is a calcium chloride brine, and its temperature is lowered by refrigeration, ammonia refrigeration plant, to around 10 or 8 degrees Fahrenheit. But of course it doesn't freeze the cover extensively, but the fresh water in the ice molds freezes to make the ice.
The factory has its own bore wells to provide fresh water. 2 of these are 180 feet deep and 12 inches in diameter. The third, sunk in 1951, is 350 feet deep and 21 inches in diameter. The fresh water is poured into the moulds. Each mould can will make a block of ice weighing 300 weight. The moulds are lowered into the brine tank, which is kept at 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Once in the tank, motor-driven screw rams push the mould along onto the floor, the distance of the width of one mould, allowing the next filled mould to be placed in the tank. The cold brine absorbs the heat from the water, turning it into ice. There are 36 rows of canned moulds beneath the floor. This process continues until the mould reaches the other end of the tank. After 27 hours travelling under the floor, where now, containing a block of ice, it is ready to be lifted out.
We've now come to the other end of the tank room where the ice has gradually come through the tanks and is now being made up into ice. So the next movement here will be this row of ice will be taken out, lowered into a thawing tank until the actual ice pops up out of the mould or is freed from the mould. It's then transferred into what we call a tipping cradle. The cradle rotates and allows all the blocks to slide out onto the tank room floor. The blocks are then put onto conveyors which take the blocks through crushers, then through elevators or conveyors to arrive in the ships or in the lorries or whatever is required to put the ice into.
Here we see the canned moulds full of ice and the warm thawing tank next to it. Warm water is provided from heat exchangers which have taken heat from the ammonia compressor discharge gas. Ice, being less dense than water, floats free of the moulds in the thawing tank. The ice harvester crane lifts the moulds into the tipping cradle, where the ice blocks are slid out of the mould. The working day at the factory was from 7:12 AM to 5 PM. conveyors take the blocks of ice to the crushers, which were mostly built by the company's own tradesmen to their own specification. At one time, 2 of each of the trades were employed, including turners, sheet metal workers, welders, joiners and coopers. From here, the crushed ice can fall to either bucket elevators or an ice holding tank. We are now up on the factory roof. Cooling water is taken from the dock by 2 18-inch suction pipes positioned under the west market. Here we can see the tops of the ammonia condensers. Ammonia is compressed to a high pressure gas and then condensed to a liquid form in these heat exchangers, where it is cooled by water pumped out of the dock, which goes through the exchanger tubes and back into the dock. The ammonia gas surrounds the tubes in the vessel and is converted to a liquid. The liquid is then transferred to an evaporator coil. The ammonia then evaporates, extracting heat from the brine in the brine tanks, and in turn the brine extracts heat from the water in the ice making moulds, thus making ice. The icing points, where for many years crushed ice has been poured into the trawler holds prior to a fishing trip. Small quantities of ice are used around the dockside for fish packing, and this has been delivered in batch quantities by cement mixer lorries, of which 4 of the original fleet of 12 are still running. Beneath our feet, much of the factory stands quiet and deserted, with only 2 of the original 7 tanks still working. It seems very quiet and desolate compared to the noise and bustle of the working tank areas. The modern replacement for the ice tanks is this flake ice making plant. The greatly reduced market for ice, as a result of improvements in refrigeration, can now be supplied by this type of equipment. The ice barrels have for years been a common sight on the dockside, and the cooper's workshop at the factory had 2 coopers working flat out to maintain supplies of new or repair the old barrels.
That would be for rolling new.
Here we see Alan Bridges, the last remaining Grimsby cooper, at work constructing a barrel. When he finishes work at the end of the month, an old traditional trade will have come to an end in this town. For the past 2 months, Alan has been preparing for his retirement, working only 2 days per week.
Oh, put them on when they're up, don't they? So the contract, I believe.
Under new EEC regulations to be brought in, wooden containers will no longer be allowed to be used in the food industry.
Then when the moisture comes back into the wood, it tightens them up. Yeah.
Ice making in large quantities for the trawling trade will shortly be no more, and this site will be lost forever. Fish preparation continues as normal on the dockside and is oblivious to the major changes taking place. traditional part of the fishing industry is about to disappear. It was the ice in such large quantities that kept the fish fresh, from being caught, through processing and packing to delivery. It helped to make the name for fresh Grimsby fish. Ice will still be used, but never again produced in the same way that it was at the Grimsby Ice Factory.